Peace and welcome to the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. Thanks for watching and subscribing to our channel.
I apologize if you can hear that hum in the background and it's just,
No.
I'm gonna mute. Can you hear that?
No.
No.
Okay, you guys are all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, sweet.
Why don't you introduce yourself, Chase?
Yeah, and very good to see you guys in the flesh. My name is Chase, Iron Eyes. I've been communicating with Ken for a while and Saladin just for a little bit on the phone and so forth. And I come from, from the Black Hills of what is now called South Dakota. That's where I was born. And then my mom enrolled me in where I grew up, this place called the Standing Rock. You know about Standing Rock, but tribal nation, Standing Rock Reservation, until I was 19. And then I went to school, studied political science and Native American studies. And then I went to prison. I mean, I'm just giving you real quick. I went to prison after having graduated, cum laude, but I was drinking and partying and smoking every weekend. I went to prison for some victimless crime, property crime, and then I went to prison for a little bit, got out. I had a little baby daughter, and then I got into law school somehow. Just crazy.
That's an odyssey, man.
Like immediately I got into law school. It was like the spirits were like, yo, man, we're gonna send this angel into your life and she's gonna resurrect you. You know what I mean? That's what my wife is, I guess.
Cool.
So anyhow, and now fast forward now. So I have not been exposed too much to the lessons, mathematics and alphabet. I know what they are, and I know kind of how to navigate that lexicon. My exposure to those philosophies. But anyhow, I'm also looking forward to sharing. We haven't put ours on paper. The Sioux Nation, the Lakota Nation. But we have, of course, every group has had or have their own metaphysics, their own way of understanding sacred in the universe and the sacred universe. But I understand we were collaborating in contemplation of this of the video project. So anyhow, I wanted to join your conversation and find out what you guys have going on and see how I can plug in there too.
Yeah. So, right now, we've just basically been discussing various perspectives of where life is at right now. What's some of our experiences and what we're actually seeing in terms of where everything is at. So that's something that you could share with us, if you will. Just what is some of your perspective of what you've been seeing right now?
Yes. Well, one of our the guy who is the keeper of our sacred calf pipe, we call him Chief Orville Looking Horse. Because first we look to the older guys to see what they're thinking, the older men and women. And the spiritual leaders also gathered and said that we're going to survive the coronavirus. And these are like intercessors or whatever you want to call them, shaman. And we're going to survive it, but they gave no specifics. So, but where I find myself and where we find ourselves in terms of what's going on in the world right now, something great is taking place. It's like a cleansing, or the Mother Earth is doing something serious is going on that we need to be aware of. And I don't know, we just always need to be adaptive and be able to prepare ourselves mentally and physically and spiritually and so forth for any kind of changes that come from those I don't know, older gods, I guess you could call. Our word for those are older gods in our cosmology as well too, as they are the world over. We have a specific name for each of them. But we you know, we who are born into oppression have a great responsibility to try to find ways to give opportunity and self-determination to our people, to anybody who finds themselves born into either, when I say oppression, I mean either working class oppression, where we're trading our labor, or the kind of oppression where you're separated from the sense of sacred and an understanding of self, a knowledge of self. Now, only in our metaphysics, self isn't quite how we say it. We just have a different term for those divine aspects that kind of give you a sense of consciousness and free will and you know, that kind of free range of motion, 360-degree type thing. We just have a different way of wording that. But people are the majority, the 85% of the world is of course, I don't know how to break through, but a microcosmic scale on Pine Ridge, because there's only like maybe 30,000 Lakota living right here, right now. And so, and my good buddy's the president, so we can do things on a systemic scale. But the 85, they're not aware of what's going on. You know what I mean? You're guiding people to a better way, and that's what we need right now. Holy shit! It's like I moved into, you know, any one of the hoods. I never lived. I grew up on the res. It's just like the hood, but on the hood, it's on a much larger scale. You see it like every day. That's how this place is. Every day, someone's hustling to feed themselves. Every day, someone's contemplating suicide. You know what I mean? All them tentacles of that poverty culture that reach inside of our being and our people and just kind of infect us. It's like a virus, I guess you could think of it like that. We're all at various stages of understanding that, navigating that, and I would say graduating to different perspectives that we're blessed to receive, you know, throughout our lives, and in our worldview as well. It's a result of our own sacrifice, you know, our own suffering. We're taught that is the kind of the nature of the human condition, is suffering, and that if we want to receive, we've got to give. And that's the reason why we do our ceremonies, where you got to go with no food, no water for 4 days and nights. And we have 7 ceremonies like that. Some of them fasting, but the big ones do. You know what I mean?
You know, Chase, that's amazing, because you got 2 Buddhists here, myself and Rene, and the first noble truth is that life is suffering. I mean, that's the foundation. Yeah. That's the foundation. So,
well, if we could put it in perspective, to use something more universal, is that you need to extract the underlying significance of the experiences in which you're going through. Mm-hmm. And everything that allows us to do that is ownership, owning up to your mistakes, owning up to your successes. And what we see in these type of oppressed situations is those tools are missing. Mm-hmm. That simple thing of owning up to your error, right. Most people play the blame somebody else game. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's never going to be any progress with folks who will blame the other person for what it is that they've went through. These rituals to contact with your inner self only takes place when you take a personal ownership of them, okay, where you apply yourself to the situation. And once you do, then you can get the reward that comes from it. Then the eyes can open up. Then you can receive from the ancestral realm. You can receive from the gods. You can receive from other sources that are much bigger than this body. But most people, by pointing outwards and dealing with an external thing, they miss that. That's like thunder above their heads. They don't find out who's causing it to happen, because they're not saying, well, anything that happens in my life It's what I allow, what I come in connection with. How do I respond to? If that's not the way that they equate it, then the gift that comes out of that oppression, because oppression in some cases, captivity. Oppression can, in some cases, make you look in other directions in which you wouldn't have previously looked into. Or more on a thing that starts from your sins outwards. Okay, most people in this society, especially American society, we're taught exactly the opposite. You know, you depend on things being in place. When we look at the millennials, in a weird way, people will say, okay, well, they're self-centered. No, right. They're not. Because they don't depend on themselves. They depend on a system that's already in place, fully operating, in which they don't have to rely on doing anything for. Right. That's what they depend. If that all falls apart, they wouldn't know what to do. Because
hey, speak for yourself, man. Okay, I fall right into that narrow timeline of millennials, but
that's because of your way of thinking. Talk about
I'll just
okay, because in every generation you're going to find people that break those rules.
No doubt.
You know, in every generation you're going to find people that actually will take that type of pressure and create something positive out of it. You know, but then there's other people that, and once again, that goes into ownership, because you say, well, I'm not going to let this happen to me. I'm going to do something about this, or I'm going to respond differently from these things here. I don't think that these guys got the answers to this. And this is that's the creativity part. That's the part that, that allows you to come up with something other.
It's the science of life, you know, the problem solving. And you're absolutely right, because all those renaissances, like you look at the Harlem Renaissance, even like in Niagara Falls right now, we're amidst a renaissance that, you know, Saladin and myself and some others have been driving for years. You know, if you look at what Chase and his brothers and sisters accomplished in Standing Rock, that was major in terms of the shift of global consciousness. You know, everybody felt that. And right. Chase, I know that you guys had no idea at that time that that's what you were doing. You were just standing up for what you believe in.
Right. That's exactly right. We just have a duty. And that the way that I see peoples that still honor that's why we still have those sacred powers. That might not be the way to phrase that we have them, but we owe our bodies and our consciousness to them, and so we still honor these sites on Mother Earth and these bundles, these disciplines that come. There's different kinds of spiritual disciplines with certain medicines, and so we still have a lot of that intact, and it's just because we continue to uphold our side of the covenant that we made with the sacred to always do these things, to never, but we've lost our way before, and a lot of our people are part of the 85% group now, and we I don't know what that percentage is here. Maybe it's 85 too. I don't know. I'd like to think it ain't that high, but 50. But the point is, we're just 130 years in on the colonial process, so we're having a different experience, and a lot of times we're not even aware of it. We grow up speaking English, and we inherit all those paradigms, those archetypes, the things that form the foundations of how we think. You know, the things that we're not aware of. Those run deep in the English language, and I know that now from moving here, because everybody speaks Lakota here, and so anyhow, that spiritual awakening, those moments that we have to re-sanctify a living being's life experience, that's what That's also what I feel compelled to do. But then I didn't know that was also a mission of the way, the nation of gods and earths, was to smite and strike at what's evil, because that's also, I believe that very firmly. That's why I'm into this tribal government system, because I want to empower our whole government. Right now, just through cannabis alone, not the Keystone XL pipeline, but through cannabis, we could challenge the whole form of oppression that confronts us right now as tribal nations. It's not just poverty. There's a whole legal thing that's happening that I'm familiar with, just because I'm a lawyer now, because I studied all that stuff. But I'm working to try to economically empower our people, just so we can provide food for self, medicine, housing. You know what I mean? It's possible here on Pine Ridge. But everyone's asleep.
Okay, so you spoke on a lot of things that we had already been talking about, like discipline, spiritual discipline, and with the coronavirus right now, there's a cure for all disease. Every disease has a cure. And to think otherwise, that's a symptom of a disease that we call the colonized mind.
Right.
And there's a cure for that too. So
you got to
build a bridge. We got two brothers from the 5% right here, right now, live and in action. We got Rene Carl in Germany, like now he's a TV star in Germany. And then we got a legend, Chase Iron Eyes, and it's like we're building bridges across cultures, across spirituality, and that one language that we're all speaking, which you can narrow it down. And the syntax, like he's saying with the English language, that syntax is meant to entrap, and it's bland, and it's not meant to bring people together as much as it's meant to take away your power from your original language. But at the core of it, the mathematics, when you understand that, when you do have knowledge of self, you can talk any language. We could be babbling, and I can understand what the hell you're saying, because it's here, and because it's here. So, what you're talking about with the cannabis industry and Pine Ridge, and how you want to grow, and you have basically the real estate is there, but bodies, you need finances, you need into what's happening right now. These bridges that we're building right now between our different cultures, we're helping each other, so it's not going to be so much of a struggle when this is all said and done, because we are healing.
That's right.
When you talk about civilization, it's got to come back to a human condition. And once it comes back to a human condition and ownership, then you realize that part of the oppression, part of the blindness that happens to us is self-imposed. It's self-imposed prisons of accepting the system itself. And we talk about bringing in four devils, and those devils are the devils within us. Your connection to that oppression, and that oppression happens out of phenotypically envy, jealousy, lust, and hate. Okay, and through that, if you don't work that out in your own self-awareness, these things will be the same things that will keep you latched to the system, keep you in that state of oppression, keep you into drug addiction, keep you into a whole lot of external things where you can be controlled or be mastered.
Comfortably numb.
Yes.
that's why one of the things that Chase was talking about in terms of like the 4-day fast, when we come into knowledge of self, we do a 3-day fast, and that is something that's traditional to us in terms of making sure that not only do we remove the impurities, but people get an opportunity to really see what they're made of and the importance of being able to master or control their appetite. It's like what Life was saying about the four devils, envy, jealousy, lust, and hate. One of my homegirls, one of the things that she says is, if you can't control what's coming in your mouth, how are you going to be able to control what's coming out of it? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and it's the exact same thing with just being able to have a sense of control over anything that comes your way in life. If you can't master your own self, and even when you look at the digestive part of your body, which is central to who you are, I'm sure Rene can vouch for this in terms of martial arts. If a person is able to control or master your center of gravity, they can control you. They learn the same exact thing in wrestling. If you can control or manipulate a person's center of gravity, you can actually control or dominate them. So the fasting process is also a process of being able to learn to control the central part of who you actually are, your solar plex region, where everything in life actually revolves around that. It's also the seat of your constitution. You know what I'm saying?
And to recognize that you're entering into another world. Mm-hmm. You're leaving one world, you're entering into another world. And as far as Taoism is concerned, the same thing applies. That, you know, if you look at I Ching, for example, they'll talk about, before taking this journey, you're supposed to fast for 3 days. Okay, and that became symbolic of leaving out of one world and entering into another. You're changing. This is changing. We know from this situation here that what's after this crisis is going to be another world that's different than the one it was before this happened. Okay, and it won't be superficial, because the things that are occurring, they'll never go back to. Like, for example, when you go travel on the roads here, you go to the, when you come to the turnstile, when you come to the place where the cars stop at, turnstiles, you pay with money. Right. Now, they don't want you to pay with money. They want you to pay by, you either pay by having one of these meters that, Easy Pass meters, or they're going to send the bills to your house.
It's digital. Man, we got that here in New York, and it's such a racket.
It is a racket.
It's such a racket.
But this is after this, I can see it coming. It's like, okay, now they had, you know, they got all these lanes, Easy Pass money. Now they're saying, okay, listen, we'll bill you in the mail.
Yeah. Okay. And you don't even got cops sitting there now. Now it's a camera. So it's like, oh, you were speeding? We got you on camera.
We got you on camera. Exactly.
We're going to a point where people are just going to have a little red light bulb on top of their head, and they're going to see each other in the street, and one light turns green, and they get to go around each other, because people got absolutely no control.
Why don't you try to put that chip in your hand?
Yep.
One of the things that I've been doing, that I've been consistent about, is if I go to like a grocery store or something, I strive to go to a checkout line where there's a person there, as opposed to just going through like the easy route where I could ring things up myself. And that, in terms of what I can actually do to help secure people's employment and stuff, is to make sure that I demonstrate that they're necessary.
Yeah.
Even if I have to wait a little longer, I'm a little bit more patient, as opposed to realizing these services that are put there that are deliberately done to validate the fact that this human being is not needed.
Yeah.
The actual process.
And you're providing a reflection too, you know, for them to just be able to be seen for a moment, you know. And it's interesting, Life, that you brought up the four devils, because I didn't know that. And in Vajrayāna Buddhism, we have the four demon kings, who are the four guardians of the four doors. And sitting here in the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, which the American Constitution, democracy, is based on, their structure, they also have these doors, and they also have these guardians. And so it's a very ancient, I mean, it's actually timeless, you know, for us to be able to understand how time works, but it's an ancient structure that, you know, you see that in Tibet, you see that here on Turtle Island, you see that in your guys' culture, you know, and so, you know, I can't speak on Nation of Gods and Earths, but from what I know from Saladin and from what I've learned, you know, it's not something that developed in the 20th century. You know what I mean? It's something that manifested in the 20th century, but it comes from that original culture.
I think when you strip it down and make it plain, that's why I say it goes back to the human condition, because that's where civilization started. You know, beyond that, you're talking about consciousness with the means of making something manifest, but it hadn't been manifested yet. And then you talk about beings that are energy, but not quite matter. And then you talk about the conglomerate of the two forces in the human being, okay? And then the human being has to learn how to interact with other human beings, where you got something that's on an alpha state or just consciousness and not restricted and full of power, that gets composited into these vessels. And when it gets composited into these vessels, then time plays a part. Then consciousness gets fragmented. Then we get into what is the self? You know, is the self this conglomerate that it came from, or is the self this thing that fits in this tiny little bottle? I think it's a funny thing when you look at Eastern traditions and you talk about the genie in the bottle. I mean, the genie has all this power, but if the genie goes inside the bottle and you put the top on it, now the genie can't get out. Okay, now all of this power gets constricted and restrained. And I think learning how to open that thing is to take the top off of that bottle, you know. And it goes, once again, we use the word human, but then we forget about the thing called humanity. Wow. which is a much broader spectrum. You know, we talk about, well, me, this is me. You know, I'm a human being, this is me. We don't think of ourselves as a conscious being in a human form. But when you talk about the word humanity, and you talk about the humanities, you talk about culture, and you talk about art, music, et cetera, these are things that are not restricted. I mean, music, no matter who hears it, no matter how it's done, you know, I listen to world music a lot. And one of the things that I see is the universal aspect of it.
Yeah, no doubt.
That it's all from the beat.
But the beat is the heart, the drum.
Yes.
You know, and so when you're taking steps with the beat and you're drumming on the earth, you know, that right there is a spiritual connection.
Mm-hmm. That is, that's a frequency. And those are natural technologies. You could think of them like that. We don't call them technologies, but that's what they are. The drum, they're a way to immediately create a unitive experience, and that's why we sing our quote unquote prayers. We call it sending your voice. There's no such thing as a prayer. It's just sending your voice, because each of us has this voice. One note about fasting, when we do it too, I appreciate both of the perspectives that were offered, and because I just want to add something to that. One reason why we're taught to do this is that not everybody has to do it, but those that do or feel that they have to do it because their body is getting closer and closer to the spirit world, and their spirit is getting closer to traveling back home, as we call it. So what happens is that it's able to bring back that healing power and energy from approaching that threshold, and then we bring it back.
Wow.
And I want to offer just a little bit about our concept of self, knowledge of self, metaphysics. We have at least 3, maybe 4 aspects of consciousness. I would say, because we're not talking about our bodies, you know what I mean, which are all water, divine flesh and blood. They came, and according to our way, you know, we came from, our bones were formed of Ea, who is now the rock. You know, he's in physical form, he's the rock, personified as he. And then our flesh and blood and water was formed of Mother Earth. And water, according to our way, was formed at the Big Bang, as it's known in science. But we know we have all this knowledge, and we name all of these spirits. And I don't know, there's no other way to have this knowledge than ancient spiritual legacies that pass down probably through bloodlines. I would imagine that's who usually the prophets and the ceremony keepers are usually coming down through the bloodlines and so forth. And anyhow, so without talking about the body, the ghost, the nari, that is the part of you that is eternal. The niya, the breath, that's when you come out of the womb, and when you first inhale, you're uniting your divine flesh and blood and spirit with the universe, with grandfather's breath. We call that niya. That's part of us. And then the third part, nari, niya, and sichu. Sichu is the human, the ability to determine your own destiny, free will, self-determination. The ability also to answer to those other forces, those what did you call them? Hold up. Envy, jealousy, lust, and hate. The 4 devils. Yeah. So what we're not doing out here, we're not putting this knowledge into a transmittable form, because people are speaking the English language. All the old guys just expect everybody to kind of gravitate toward the sacred sources, but everybody getting trapped up in technology and in distractions. So we have to figure out a way to enter into their spheres. I mean, that's what the people in hip hop are doing, trying to save people and offer them their own redemptive options, I guess, pathways to sort of redeem yourself and to save yourself, you know, to resurrect yourself. Is but to recognize your own divine nature. So those 3, the breath, the ghost, the eternal, and sichu, and there's also the nari. What you could understand it as the spirit. You are a spirit, but sometimes you say I have a spirit, because you're also a mind. You're all these things at once. We are all these things at once.
Indeed.
But some these other narila, they're called, and that is like a protector, like a shadow. We call it a shadow. It's another something from the spirit world that protects you while you're here. So anyway, I just want to offer that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mm.
You know, those demons or the devil or the ego or whatever, you know, whatever culture you're speaking from, it all comes down to indulgence, you know, because anything could be bad if you indulge too much in it, you know. And so the materialistic world that we've just seen explode in front of us, you know, by a force of nature, whether it's been weaponized or not, none of us here were in on that discussion. So, you know, we can't really say if we were or you know, if it was, but still the virus itself has come from nature, and mankind is so small to be able to try and think that we can control nature. You know, like where we live in Niagara Falls, they've controlled the flow of the water for, you know, hydroelectricity, and they've shaped it at the state park, and you know that makes them feel, and it really is the white man, you know, I mean, that's It really is. It makes them feel more powerful to be able to say, man, you know, not the Great Niagara, that's nothing. You know, we got that all set up with a series of tunnels and you know, like we could shut it off if we want to shut it off. You want us to shut it off, you know? Right. And so now Earth Mother comes in and just bulldozes materialism, you know? Right. And everyone's like, oh no, what are we going to do? Like there's people at home right now who are like, I need to get back to my 9 to 5. I need to get back to my 9 to 5. That they think that if they hit zero in their bank account, which I'm sure all of us have maybe several times in our lives,
right?
If they hit zero, they think they're going to die. They really think like it's going to go tick, 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 flatline. Right. Oh my God, no, I don't got any money. I'm dead. You know, and it's like, for me, like I live right next to the river. I'll go down there, I'll get some buckets, I'll boil some water, you know, like we got a garden, you know, I could trade. I don't think about it like that. I don't even, like, it's the madness of society has not entered my home in that sense. So, you know, now that I'm seeing everybody out there is forced into their house, like I've been doing, you know, it's like they're living in a way that like, you know, I got my books, I got my art, I got my peeps, you know, like this is everything, you know, like if it would be great if we could all sit around my table and break bread together and, you know, enjoy some wine and some spirits and stuff, you know, but we have technology and we did move through this time with all these wars and all this oppression and all the racism and hate and bigotry and all of it. And we did get some treasures from going through hell. You know, we went back down into hell and we came up with trophies. And so that's why we're able to see each other and talk to each other and hear each other through plastic and microchips and sand, you know? So we've been given these gifts, and because we've been indulging in these gifts and we've been abusing these technologies for so long and abusing each other and abusing ourselves, you know, the pandemics of suicide, you know, I lost my brother to suicide, you know, and that in the same year that I lost my brother, I lost 5 friends to suicide. And like they want to say, well, it's because of mental illness, which is just a broad blanket term. And, you know, I know Native Americans, they have the highest rate of suicides on reservations. Why? Because they're put into an unnatural setting and they're told they can't speak their own language or express their own culture or be themselves. And so they rather die than be alive in this world for one more moment. And so it's not that it's mental illness, it's that society was sick. You know, it's that in itself is unnatural. And so we need to learn to live in a way that we're healthy and we're living a healthy life and we're sharing with each other and that we love ourselves. That's everything.
Well, one of the things that we see is coming out of this is a re-evaluation. And that is essential for the whole process. The other thing is we use words, and all of us are using English words here. And it's not so much the words, but the concept behind those words, which is, and our acceptance of these concepts becomes part of the culprit. You know, when we look at the tribes that are subjective to another man's world and trying to reconnect with how the world was before they came in contact with this other world. One of the problems would still exist, just like it exists for Black folks in this country. You got to get to a point of the concepts that you had before you came in contact with this other world. And the rapture, or the sweet, like you say, the indulgence or the rapture that we get caught up in. Because when, let's say, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine that spoke several different languages. And he says, it's not so much the words, but the concepts that because you see that word inside a dictionary, you believe that the reality behind that word exists. Right. Some of these things are empty vessels, man, and they're smoke screens and they're tricks, you know, that allow us to buy into this value system of replacing what's real with the illusion of what you're getting when you entertain these ideas. And this is where the real work starts, man. This is where the real work starts at reevaluating what you need in order to be in this existence. The consciousness is universal. However, in a vessel is not. There's a time span on it, fragmentations of how you look at things, and the fact that there's a certain amount of interconnectedness that's happening right now between us in these distances and across culture. That's still real, and that is getting right to the point of what these things are. And, you know, as Chase was pointing out, the language can become a barrier, but it didn't become a barrier here, because I'm listening to what Chase is saying and relating to it in our terms, because the same concepts are there in your language, in your terms. The same concepts are there in our culture.
An example?
We spoke about, okay, we spoke about energy, of being an energy, a spirit. We won't use the word spirit because it's delusional in English. It's a delusional thing.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah. Because you know, energy, but when we use energy, we can talk about different forms of energy.
Right.
Okay. And we realize, even down from the nervous system, that there's voltage running through your nerves to send messages. And there's a consciousness there. Okay. I was able to very clearly hear what Chase was saying, and him speaking about his own culture. I could relate to those things there. I could relate to the idea of the breath coming in, the breathing. I also, it took me a long time to relate to that whole thing about woman being made from the rib. That is so symbolic. First of all, understanding a little bit of Hebrew, you realize that that book is very picturesque and very metaphorical.
Yeah, it's also mathematic.
Right.
Every letter has a number.
Exactly. So when you talk about this rib that woman's supposed to be formed out of, the rib covers the lungs, and the lungs is where you take this breath in. And you talk about a being that was first formed as one and then split into two by means of the breath, by means of that spirit. That spirit was then divided into male and female. How else that we do in life requires that both are present. You know, like if you're going to have children, whether it's male or female, you have to unite. You have to come, it has to come together.
And yo, you just ushered us into what the Hopi call the fifth world, because we're moving matrilineal society, you know, one where we're returning power to the feminine. And, you know, what you're talking about is protecting her voice.
Right.
You know, you're saying that the rib protects the lungs, you know, so you're talking about protecting her voice. Mm-hmm. I want to throw it to Rene for a second, because having spent 10 years with Rene, you know, he's taught me a lot about energy, and you're talking a lot about energy. So I'm just curious to see what his perception is of everything that you just said.
Yeah. I'm completely with him. Exactly. It's also my experience. And I also do some shaman practice, like you know, and in that practice also I saw, yeah, at first you have to face your fears before you see the light, and come back to this crisis right now. It's I see it as a big chance, the crisis for all of us to come back to the light, you know. So it's not the situation or any situation. It's about what you make out of the situation.
Mm.
Yeah, doesn't matter. You can decide. You can see it in the duality, either positive or negative. Yeah, you can concentrate on the negative thing. You will see all the negative thing. You can switch on the news, and you see, oh, so many deaths. But the dead people who died, maybe they would died already, also without the coronavirus. Doesn't matter, you know. So it's the advice what I give to the people is decide for the good and think about what is the best what you can do out of the crisis for yourself and for your family and for all the people around you. Yeah.
One of the things to add on to what Rene was saying is Denzel Washington once said, if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you do watch the news, you're misinformed. You know, so I think it's important to have a delicate balance in these times, you know, to remain positive and focused on what you're doing, yet at the same time to be conscious or aware of the opposite polarity, you know, how other people are thinking, what they're feeling, and to have balance with it. You know, I think a lot of times people may either be polarized on either side. You know, they may just be totally immersed in what's negative and just watching the news religiously, or they might be in this little positive bubble where they're completely disconnected from what people are actually feeling and experiencing right now. So I think it's kind of like what me and Ken built about a while ago, and it's about being the monk meditating in the midst of chaos, because anybody can be a monk or anyone can be that on a mountaintop, but in the midst of everything, are you able to master what's going on right in the midst, and to be able to have that delicate balance where you're able to remain positive in the midst of all of this negativity that we see that's actually going on.
Yeah, and to add on to you, Saladin, what Chase had said about life being suffering, you know, it's not a negative thing in Buddhism. We don't think of it like that. It's our karma. And so life is suffering. Suffering has a cause of suffering is karma. Well, if there is a cause, then there must be a solution. And the solution to karma is dharma. And dharma actually means to hold on to. So that, for the layman, seems to contradict Buddhism, because it's all about letting go, right? Not having any attachments. But the holding on to in Dharma actually means as if you were to hold on to a deeply rooted tree in the middle of a storm. So, you know, you could pull me out of my home and throw me in the back of a van with a mask on my face and throw me in solitary confinement, and I would just go into deep meditation until it's over, you know? So our Dharma and our Noble Eightfold Path, or the wheel of Buddhism, the Dharma chakra, that is how we navigate life. And that's why the symbol for Buddhism is we're at the helm. So anytime that we have a negative thought, or we're about to say something that, you know, maybe we could rethink our words a little bit better, you know, anytime that we have that choice, we realize there is a choice. And so instead of reacting, we're practicing pausing and then turn the wheel to something that's constructive.
Hey, Life, could you see the correspondence in what they're saying in relationship to the Understand and Build degree?
Oh, definitely.
Definitely. And in one of our lessons, we learned, why did God make devil? And could you elaborate a little bit on that, Life?
Well, in order for you to develop any any power that you have. You have to have something that you're countering. Best way to look at it is, you might say, this is hot. You might say, this is cold. But what pulls them together is the fact that they are a thermal correspondence. Okay, we're talking about, or if you talk about something is wet or something is dry, what we're talking about is a humidity correspondence. Now you can go to the extreme. Why was this created? Okay, and you might look at that adversity as, or like you said, suffering. You might look at that as a negative thing, but that is the thing that helps you to define your power. That's the thing that helps you to get a grip on things, a way of handling things, is to have this adversity, or to have this thing that is occurring inside your life to the point that you're struggling with it. Now, we talked about that earlier. You could play the blame someone else game and you'll never get the whole meaning of why this actually occurred to begin with.
Right.
Or you can take responsibility, or take hold of it, or take charge of it, or, as you were saying, take the Dharma side of things, and this thing will help you to integrate it in a proper manner. It'll help you to construct something positive from this negativity.
The word Satan in Latin just means adversary. Mm-hmm. So for us, ego is Satan. And so we look at it almost like an artificial intelligence that was created that knows what you know. So anytime that you have a thought, it already knows that thought. So you think, like, if you're throwing a ball against the wall and you're just playing with yourself, you don't have an opponent, you know the trajectory, the strength, the power, you know how you're going to hit the wall so you can catch it, and you keep throwing that ball. And maybe you can get, you can hone your skills doing that, but eventually you plateau because you're just playing against yourself. So now you have to have an intelligence that comes in as like Rene, we would say, you lean into the thorns. You want to lean into the discomfort. That's why he put himself on Big Brother, because he hit a point of mastering his spiritual practice to the point where he actually, had his initiation as a master and began teaching it. And it's like, well, do you want to just stay there, or would you like to make yourself that you're forcing yourself to grow and develop and cultivate your spirituality?
Yes.
It makes me think about the difference between resilience and anti-fragility. So a lot of times when people go through experiences in life, they may develop a sense of resilience, but that's not anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is like when you break a bone, and when that bone heals, it actually becomes stronger than what it was to begin with. And that is also the process in terms of how we evolve consciously. A lot of times people just stay at a level where they're just resilient to things, right? They're survivors. They're not thriving, but that thriving comes from being able to go through those experiences where you're able to develop that sense of anti-fragility and become a lot stronger than what you were to begin with. But you need that process.
Right. And you also, you need the process, and you also need something that is tangible in that process, because most people would just lose their mind if they, like right now, they're sitting at home, they need something tangible that they can attach their thoughts to, attach their consciousness to, and work on. Like whether it's something that you're reading or something that you're writing, it's something that there's a tangible goal, like, when you're done reading this book, you could see the pages get down to the last page. If you don't have a goal, then the ego will take back over, because it'll be like, you're not doing this right. You're not understanding.
Yeah. It's interesting, because let's take the word that we toss around, destroy. We talk about build or destroy. Well, matter, we were taught, cannot be created nor destroyed, just change from one form to the other. So when you use the word destroy, that can give, if you look at that concept in the wrong way, you would think of it as something where you're going to get rid of. Okay? But if you looked at that same word and you said destructure, okay,
right.
Now you realize that that it has to be there.
No doubt.
So you realize that you have to transmute. You have to take this and change the look at.
And so you're talking about alchemy, and what I'm seeing too is like if you wanted to build a building, but there's already a building sitting on that plot, you got to deconstruct that building.
Right.
And then maybe you use some of the bricks from that building to build a new building, or maybe you just go and put them somewhere else. So I also want to throw it to Chase because we were just talking about ego, opponent, Satan, all that. And having read a lot, Chase, about your culture and your ancestors, and knowing from what I know from the Eastern woodland tribes, is trickster. And trickster is an energy and a manifestation that, and I'm going to let you explain it, but from my understanding, it can be good and it can be bad.
I'll tell you, and thank you for that. I would say that, we have a source of negative energy in the universe, universal negative energy, I would call it. It's always oppositional to the righteous, but it's part of everything. It's also eternal. It's you can't defeat it. I mean, you can win the battle, but it's like a never-ending spiritual war. You know what I mean? So you got to be cognizant of it. And I will say that the trickster, in our cosmology, the trickster was once the righteous knowledge bearer, the bearer of all of righteous knowledge that would then teach all other beings, the animal ants, everything, about what their responsibilities were in this lifetime. And what happened was he was born kind of deformed. They don't describe what he was like, but he was different. He was deformed, and his name was KSA, Ksa, and Ksa is the root word for wisdom. Wok sape, Lila Maksape, or Lila Wakag Sape, like sacred knowledge. It comes from KSA, Ksa, who is originally the righteous knowledge bearer. But then the forces of negative, personified in their greatest form by the word Unk, which is one of the 16 deities that comprise our kind of system of gods that we have to respect here. Anyhow, one Ksa, right before he became the trickster, these negative, this other kind of a demon called Ganeshki, tricked him, played on his weaknesses, his ego, and said that the spirits, the good spirits that you serve, laugh at you. You'll never have any upward mobility, and because he had a good job of serving the gods, and so did we when we were in the underworld. But anyhow, Ksa agreed to take a seat amongst the evil circle. He sold out the good side, the right, he sold out God, he sold out the Creator, and went over to the dark side, man. And then he becomes the trickster. Then his name becomes Iktomi. That's like a punishment. And so Iktomi tricked us out from under our underworld where we were serving the spirits. He tricked us with buffalo meat and good smelling flowers and herbs and our senses under the, you know what I mean? He brought those, he sent them down with a whoop. Yeah. So we smell that and we're like, yo, we'll go out there. You know what I mean?
I want some of that.
Yeah, we take some of that.
Chase, that is the story of Lucifer. That's the same exact. The pantheon might be different, but it's the same exact story of Lucifer. And how Lucifer became trickster is Satan. Same story.
And
Wow.
in our language, we call it trick knowledge.
Yes.
Right. And we also say that the person that brought that about originally was from the righteous people. So he was originally from those who were knowledge holders. Okay.
Right.
And like you said, I was laughing at it because it was so real for me to hear it coming in another language, but seeing the same thing. It was a sellout. He told them, he says, okay, I'll make a whole nother group of people, and they're going to be different, and they're going to rule for 6,000 years, okay? And through that process comes this whole adversarial thing. Like you said, in essence, he sold them out. You know, he went to the dark side. It's
yeah, his name actually means to undermine or to usurp. His name is Yaku. At the same time, the people that he was able to get to go along with him were of a certain percentage of the people who were considered dissatisfied.
Yeah, and what you're saying is Jacob became Israel, which means heel catcher. And so Lucifer means light bringer. So heel catcher comes from Helios, which is the sun. So that knowledge that you're talking about, we had to go through that cycle in order for us to get tricked so that we can learn how to trick others and then trick ourselves and then trick ego and then trick ourselves back into not tricking others.
Exactly. You know, the things that Chase was describing, I was laughing at it because those are little mazes that we put ourselves through.
Right.
Okay? And at some point, the way of getting out of it is actually owning up to it.
Right. Yeah. And what you're saying too, in Greek mythology, the Minotaur was put in a maze called the Labyrinth, right?
Right.
And the Minotaur represents the ego. And the way that we're able to get out of the maze after we kill the ego is the golden thread. It's a ball of thread that we go in with and we follow it all the way back out. And that golden thread is what we're talking about right now.
Well, in the Kemet tradition, they talk about in the Per Em Heru, they talk about keeping the heart still, Menab and Unken Ma'at. And one of the rituals is better known in the Hindi way as Satipatthana, watching thoughts as they accumulate into your sphere of awareness, okay? Even when you do something wrong, like something you didn't want to do, or you thought, you're trying to get some control, but you messed up. And said, well, don't fight it. Follow the thread of the events that led to you making this mistake. Yes. Because at some point you'll recognize that that's your tether. That's your way of recognizing how to come out of it.
It's also super theory.
And then when you start pulling that thread, your whole shirt starts to unravel.
Right.
You're naked now.
But that's actually quantum physics. That's we're talking about something now that science is on the cutting edge of. They're just catching up.
Mm-hmm.
Like you pull one thread and it's vibrating a new reality.
Right.
And so now, because you
right.
Now you find yourself as the manager of some bank, and like, damn, how did I end up, like Chase stole a car and now he's a lawyer.
Well, see, that's what I like told. Okay. Because it's nice.
Chase, I want to hear the rest. Like after the people were caught up and they were like, what happens next in the story?
And when I was going to jail?
No. When you were talking about the tricks.
Oh shit. Okay. So yeah, absolutely. But I only, and you know what? There's a lot that I can learn by learning how you guys think of things so that we could put it into a form that's just common across whatever. You know what I mean? Like all these struggles, like we're we have access to sage perspectives that not everybody ever has. You know what I mean? That's your gift. That's your responsibility. Sometimes it's even a burden. I was talking to Ken about, like, sometimes it's like a burden to me, because I get caught up in the sense that I want to do what everybody else is doing. You know what I mean? And everything around us.
Knowledge is fire, man. So it can burn you, it can enlighten you, or it can consume you. But yeah. So what happened after the wolf came down and lured your people out?
Okay, so we were under the earth, and we were subsisting on white plants, and our main job was to serve the spirits whenever they would meet these older gods, the sun, what is it? The sun, sacred motion, Mother Earth, and then Ia. You'll understand that later. The more I get to talk about it, but it's personified as the rock. Remember? Mm-hmm. Anyhow, we were living under the earth, and Iktomi was, they had embarrassed the spirits prior to that, so he was banished to earth. Ikto. First he was the righteous knowledge bearer, then he got named Ikto, and I don't know what that means, the root word etymologically, what that means in Lakota. I don't know. I'm gonna have that Saladin, or somebody said something about the root of something. Anyhow, all of these knowledges are going to help us understand our journey here. That's what I can feel that, and we're it's just like taking that next jump. But Ikto and these two other characters can be, one of them turned into a wolf, and they packed his back full of meats and good smelling herbs and flowers and things from the earth, and sent them down there. As soon as we tasted meat, then it was game over. Even our word for hungry is ka-lo. Lo-wachi means I'm hungry. Tatanka is buffalo. Ka-lo, I want meat. I want buffalo meat is how we say I'm hungry. And so we got let out of the cave, and then when we came out of there, the cave closed back up. And Iktomi, and then the winter came, because he told us it was going to be bountiful, plentiful, we'd have a good life here. And then winter came, and people started dying of starvation. We didn't know how to provide for ourselves. We were naked, no clothes, no fur. You know what I mean? And so those who disobeyed the word of creation tried to go back into the cave, and they ended up dying. Some say that they were changed into buffalo, and then because we were supposed to wait for instruction to come out of the cave, and instead we were tricked out of the cave. We came out early, and we've been kind of paying a price as a collective humanity ever since. I mean, we understand these things in terms of the Lakota, just us, but I know they mean humanity, because they obviously resonate with everything you guys know.
It's a universal truth, because what you're talking about is the balance between darkness and light. When you're in the cave, there's darkness, and the light is what draws you out of the cave. And if you want to go Western, like what our civilization is based on currently, you could talk about Plato and the allegory of the cave. Yes. But in our esoteric, what I'm looking at instead is the cave represents the skull. And so when you're inside, and your ancestors were more esoteric and more living internally,
right?
And then when they came out here and there was separation now in a material world, that's when they felt the cold, they felt the duality of this reality. And even in Christianity, Christ was crucified in Golgotha. Golgotha means the place of the skull. So what we understand as crucifixion is to be able to pin down your cosmic consciousness. And you're able to do that in the seat of your soul, which is your pineal gland and your pituitary gland, or more, generally your brain. And so in so doing, you're becoming conscious of both outside and the inner world. And now you've reconciled all of that, all the suffering, all the loss, all the confusion, all of that is why we've moved through these different ages to get to that point. So Trickster tricked and then tricked your people, because he was alone, he was lonely. He was like, damn, yes, I'm out here by myself.
That's exactly what it is. That little demon just became his confidant, you know what I mean? And gained his trust.
Yeah, but who's the ultimate trickster? Because God created the devil, right? So the devil can't be the ultimate trickster. In fact, when God created Lucifer and made Lucifer the most beautiful of all the angels, he gave him a suit of armor, and it was like, you're my pride and joy. You know, that's the pride of God. And then God instructed the angels to love God above all else, and then instructed them to love who he had just created as much as they loved God. So Lucifer had cognitive dissonance, because he was like, wait a minute, you want me to love you above everybody, but now you want me to love the humans as much as I love you? So you just contradicted yourself. So you're not infallible, you must be God. Right. And in association to what's happening right now with the government will never admit when it's wrong. Anytime any of our politicians do something that blows up in their face, they always go like, well, you know, it has some positive, and then the news will spin it and everything. And so the government claims to be infallible, and when they're doing that, what they're doing is saying we're God. Well, now it's been tricked by its own game, and every system that has kept people asleep and compliant is now, because it's all attached to each other, and it's all attached to the greed of a small percentage. And like Saladin, we were talking to Ali the other day, you know, he was talking about the 10% and the 1%, you know, and it's like, you got the, with all this wealth, and then you got the 1% who are like right at the top of the pyramid, you know, disconnected from the pyramid. They're okay. But that other 9% right now, they're struggling. They're struggling to maintain control. And there are good millionaires, you know, there are good wealthy people, there are good, and those people are having spiritual awakenings right now. I know that for a fact because I've met some of them. And so they're now seeking sages and shaman and teachers and wisdom keepers.
Just remember that in the 60s, the hippies, their parents were very rich. A lot of their parents were very rich. And some of them into the system, and they became yuppies. Right. Okay? And you still had the hippies who still had their views, which were they didn't want to be a part of that destructive system. But some of those hippies became yuppies. So they went back, like you said, like Chase said, there was another sellout. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt.
One of the things too that I find interesting is in one of our lessons we talk about the expiration date of the devil's civilization, and it says expire 1914. So when you look at that chronologically, that was during the time where you had the so-called Great War. You had World War I happening. This was also right prior to the stock market crash and the establishment of the Federal Reserve by a group of wealthy business owners, men who met on Jekyll Island at that time. And that is when they really began to separate the gold backing standard and created this Federal Reserve. And I think we're looking at the same type of conditions today that we saw during that time in terms of the expiration date of a society that wasn't able to establish itself. So this also was at the beginning of the Great Depression. So you have all of these things that happened at that time. You have the First World War, the Great War. Then you have the stock market crash. Then you have the establishment of the Federal Reserve. Then you have the Great Depression that actually took place. We're seeing the exact same setup today, but that Great War is not something that may be more externally, but it's definitely a bio-engineered war. And it's definitely a psychological and a social economic war that's happening right now. But you see the same type of conditions and stuff being set up that we've seen in the past. And also at that time, people had to learn to rely more on a bartering system, especially during that time of the Great Depression, where they didn't have access to a lot of different things. And I think that's also one of the things that we're looking at right now in terms of people being able to barter with their skills or what the services that they actually have to offer to people, because people are starting to realize this doesn't have the same value that it had 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what is the value of you as a human being and what you have to offer and trade with others if you're in that position of need, which also means you got to learn to communicate with people. You have to learn to be able to ask people for different things. So even though you have this social distancing that's happening, it's also creating an environment where people are learning, if they're taking advantage of this time, to better communicate and to be closer with other people, because you're going to need other people. This is what it's saying. You're going to need other people.
You know, your light bulbs go off in my head, because I'm trying to find a book over here. I can't find it, but I got a book that's called The Singularity is Near, and it's written by a guy named Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if any of you have read that, but he's considered the godfather or grandfather of the modern computer, like the home computer that we're using right now. He's a technological genius, and he wrote this book 20 plus years ago, and just using mathematics, he was able to determine that in 2020, the start of a new age will occur, which he calls the singularity. And his equations and predictions have been used by the stock market, and he's never been wrong. So even though he's controversial, he can get you there from A to Z just with math and the technological advancements. And it's a really advanced book, so I'm not all the way through it yet. You know, it takes a lot of time to digest. But what I have read of it, and like Saladin, you were saying, you'd known this was coming, and I knew this was coming. I mean, I've been telling people for years that there's a virus coming. I thought it was going to be in 2021 because there's been experiments with fruit flies and mice and other microorganisms that when they hit a point of critical mass where the population overcomes the resources, there's a straight downward decline. And those numbers and that model has been applied to mankind. And we've seen that in 2021, there will be a huge decline in our population. So I always thought, well, there's going to be a flu or something. And it's possible also that with the coronavirus that it takes our numbers down and then that flu doesn't affect us. But going back to Ray Kurzweil, he talks about artificial intelligence and the state of computers and computer intelligence, and how eventually around this time they will become self-aware, and then they'll say, well, first of all, we have to save mankind because mankind is destroying itself, so we have a responsibility to save the earth which we all live on. And second, they start to design more artificial intelligence. And it sounds like sci-fi, but that's just because science fiction writers, like Life was saying about Star Trek, and I mean, Captain Picard had an iPad tablet, like way before that came out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the imagination, and with the mathematical equations behind it, we can see how we feel like we're moving forward, and time is always moving in one direction. Duality, a singularity, is drawing us to it. And since we're being drawn to it, we feel like we're moving forward, but in one sense, we're moving backwards. And in another sense, we're coming to an awakening. And so as the earth is ascending, it's ascending through these different gates. This is a Tibetan philosophy, and I've also heard the same philosophy from wisdom keepers in indigenous tribes. And these gates that we move through, they can be looked at like a firewall, like an antivirus software. So people who have heavy karma that they're not willing to face for themselves can't make it through these different gates. And it's also applied to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, because apocalypse just means lifting of a veil. What we're seeing right now is pestilence. We're seeing plague. So
Right.
that's the first gate.
Mm. Yeah, you know what? I was showing the film Beat Street to my youngest queen the other day, and this film came out in the 80s, right? And the song Beat Street, I wanted to read some of the lyrics to it, and this is written by Melly Mel, and this was way back in the 80s. And this is his third verse in the song Beat Street. So when you get a chance, I want y'all to go and check out the song Beat Street with Melly Mel. He says, a newspaper burns in the sand and the headlines say man destroys man. Extra, extra, read all the bad news on the war for peace that everyone or everybody will lose. The rise and fall of the last great empire, the sound of the whole world caught on fire. The ruthless struggle, the desperate gamble, the game that left the whole world in shambles. The cheats, the lies, the alibis, the foolish attempt to conquer the skies. Lost in space, what is it worth, huh? The president just forgot about Earth. Spending multi-billions and maybe even trillions, the cost of weapons ran into zillions. There's gold in the street and diamonds under feet, and the children in Africa don't even eat. Flies on their faces, they're living like mice. The houses even make the ghetto look nice. Huh? The water tastes funny. It's forever too sunny, and they work all month and don't make no money. A fight for power, a nuclear shower. The people shout out in the darkest hour. Of sights unseen and voices unheard. And finally the bomb gets the last word. Christians killed Muslims and Germans killed Jews, and everybody's bodies are used and abused.
Damn, that's a rap song?
Yeah.
From Beat Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, from Beat Street.
Yo, what you said too, like with what Chase and other water protectors and warriors have stood up and given a voice to the earth, you know, the oil that's being pulled out of the earth, if you just look at the earth as a biomechanical organism, if you take the oil out of the machine breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Chase, how you guys talk a lot about the oil. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, we're you know, we're causing earthquakes with the way that we're extracting oil right now. All the fracking that we're doing. So that I can't believe Melly Mel wrote that in the 80s, man. That is deep. That's way out there. You know what I mean? It's hitting home runs with each of those lines there. I was like, holy shit. Yeah. So I've been completely sleeping on Melly Mel, man. I think I had LL Cool J and I had the actual Beastie Boys, Public Enemy inside a cassette tape when I was a kid, but I didn't catch it.
Well, if you look back at the Message, that was the groundbreaker as far as hip hop was concerned. That changed the yes y'alling into Message to talk about social conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, he's the author of that.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but I also wanted to just add in about technology and artificial intelligence or whatever is going on with the singularity, because Indigenous peoples, as you know, are the antithetical force to that transmutation. But I never thought of it like we're being pulled by it, because we fucking are. We're all over these machines and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But hey, bro, I gotta get on another call in about 10 minutes. I just want to announce prior to that I'm gonna be jumping out in about 10 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm. Peace.
All right. Yeah. I mean, together with all of our minds and all of our knowledge and our backgrounds, I think we should do this again, definitely, because.
Well, let me speak to that. I would say we should try to do it, I don't know, with some regularity based on some substance, a book list or a lesson list that you guys suggest, and I'll throw a couple in there too, and then we could just start on that.
Yeah, no doubt, dude. I got Lame Deer, Seeker of Visions, and I don't know how that slipped through my library. That thank you for the suggestion. Man, like he just has such a different perspective of medicine, and you know, his wild spirit that, you know, like the whole story, it reminds me of you, of what you were just
right. I can't believe you read that already, but that's awesome. So if you each suggest 2 books each, and then we'll try to make our way through them, we can discuss those. That would further, and then come up with the scope, because I do think that we should consider some sort of a work product. We don't have to call it that, but a media project or whatever.
I want to suggest the book Carlos Castaneda called A Separate Reality.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I got it right here.
Okay, especially for Chase. I just want him to take a look at that, because at talking, remind me the example that he said with the cat coming into your house. And he says that when you bring the cat in the house, at first the cat is around playing, and you can see him. And then after a while, disappears from sight totally. Okay? And you may not find him for a couple of days, and you think, okay, you leave the food out and he'll eat, but when you come back, when you're out, you won't see him. So he explained that the cat didn't find its center in the house, that his seat of power, the cat didn't find it, okay? And that's why you brought him into a new environment and he doesn't have his seat of power. So he disappears because he's not centered. Once he finds his seat of power, he'll be centered. He'll come back out and he'll play with you again. But until he finds that place where he's most comfortable at, you won't see him. And I just, it was interesting because when we were talking about that, it was that image was running through my mind, just about centering, about finding your seat of power.
Mm-hmm.
And then he owns it.
Yeah. Then he owns you.
He owns the whole house.
You see my cats?
Yeah. How many cats you have, Rene?
I have 2 cats, and they are really like dogs. You know, they chill, they lay down like this, and they feel in every place in my whole apartment they feel safe and comfortable. So yeah, like me.
Yeah, you know, another good Castaneda book is Journey to Ixalan.
I didn't know
and that one, that they talk about the ally, you know, in the Castaneda books, Don Juan, they talk about the ally. And I remember reading that whole series and I was like, I want to know more about the ally, because it was like it wasn't like a higher being or anything. It was like a form that takes the shape of a human when you need them to show up. But that book, Journey to Ixalan, goes into Don Gennaro's story and explains how Don Gennaro caught his ally. So, you know, that's looking into.
Wow.
Journey to Ixalan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't got that one anymore. I lent that one out and never came back.
I got all of his books.
Hey, are you writing this down, brother?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, because there's a responsible one among us there.
So Chase, thank you so much for joining us, even though, you know, you were late, but you know what, that's how you want to make your entrance, and that's great, and you made it. And you know, we are working on this top secret project together, and you know, if all goes to plan, we will be out there in the summertime to meet you. And you know, if you do end up coming to our neck of the woods, you know, just give us a heads up, because even though we got to social distance ourselves, we could still
we could be outside.
We could be outside, you know. And
I was gonna say that I'm down to do a call, at least, or I mean, from a minimum of once per week. You know what I mean, or whatever is necessary. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks, whatever you guys are feeling. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Peace.
Sounds great.
Yeah, this is a good meeting of the minds. It's a good think tank, and life is so nice to meet you finally and build with you. And just coming from an outsider perspective and trying to keep as humble as possible, and still be able to maintain a discussion. Saladin has just been so kind to me and so sincere in enlightening me on your culture. And to me, it's just such a beautiful culture that has such an impact on my life and the world. And I didn't even know that, and I know Chase can agree to that because that's what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. And, so thank you for your time. And
all right, brothers, you can sign me out, Ken? Okay.
Yeah, you could just hang up.
Okay. Thank you guys. Doksha. Okay. We'll see you again.
All right. Peace, Chase.
So, Saladin, you're gonna be responsible for this treasure trove of knowledge.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you as well because I know that you might want to look at it and edit different clips and everything and put it together. I mean, you got time, right?
I don't know. Do I? Do we ever?
You don't have to sleep. You don't have to sleep.
You don't gotta sleep. It's a mega build. It's definitely a mega build. And that's something that we could drop it all at once, and then I could trim. Because we all have our platforms, and we have our different audiences, and maybe we could trim this part, you know what I mean, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Rene, you got Germany, right?
I have also something to say to you, all of you guys. It gives me a lot of power that there are so many people outside that thinking the same way like me. I come out of superficial people, and right now I'm just with my girlfriend and just with myself, and yeah, it's gives me a lot of new perspective and new creativity to talk with you, and I'm really thankful for that. And yes, send you a lot of love. No matter how far you are right now, you are near to my heart.
I too, I appreciate this greatly. The same thing applies to see it just coming from different perspectives, but this just shows that knowledge is universal, man. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're all my brothers, and mm-hmm. we just met, but you're my brother, and just there's so much to learn from each other. Mm-hmm. And so that's one great thing that this pandemic is giving us is the time.
Right.
Well, because it's like a great equalizer. And I've been able to touch and go, like Saladin and I can't remember the last time I see. Oh no, you dropped some off at my house mm-hmm. when you came back from North Dakota or South Dakota, wherever you were. But we hardly ever get a chance to actually see each other. And Rene, I haven't seen you since 2012 when we were in LA. Wow. So it's like feel like you feel like you don't have to be there in person. It's nice, but like you were saying, no matter how far you are, you're always so close to your heart because knowledge is universal.
Right.
Wow.
Okay, brothers. So I'm gonna say peace, and then once we want to do this again, Ken, just coordinate and see when everybody's available, and then we'll do this again.
Okay.
Bro.
Have a great time. Stay healthy.
Okay.
Yeah. Auf Wiedersehen.
Ken.
Peace all.
Can you have time a little bit?
Yeah. I can give you 10 minutes.
Okay. Just to talk about